Shabbat Shalom. Well, we are starting the very last book of the Torah this evening, Parsha Devarim. Devarim itself means words. We discuss this often. It comes around and around and around. Why? Because we keep reading this Torah year after year after year, and the themes repeat themselves. This whole last book is a repetition of everything that's happened up till this point. So we are now getting an entire recounting. So if you feel like you're having a deja vu throughout the next few weeks, you actually are. Words can hurt. Words can heal. And as it is said, God spoke the world into being. Words, therefore, can create, and words can destroy. In Jewish mysticism, words carry the divine voice. It is the creative force in the universe. So when they say, "May the force be with you," that's where they got it from. Moses' speech is an example of how the power of words can manifest spiritual truths in our physical world. Moses spent 40 years in the desert speaking to the Israelites, trying to uplift, trying to educate, trying to mold, trying to encourage, and yes, sometimes reprimanding in order to lead them into the promise. But the incident with the spies that we talked about just a few weeks ago, and the tales of woe and negativity that were the final straw, made sure that neither they, the Israelites, nor Moses was getting into the promised land. This parsha sets the stage for the very next generation, that generation that was not born into slavery. The next generation with a recounting of everything that had happened so that they can hopefully learn from it and carry fresh lessons going forward. Using words to help seal the deal and hopefully a framework for fate and the future to unfold in a positive manner, more in accordance and keeping with God's divine will. This parsha falls just prior to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is next week, Wednesday evening, Thursday day. It is the darkest day in our calendar, when we remember the 2 temples that were destroyed, among the many other atrocities that have been inflicted upon Jews throughout history on that day. And in past years, we've gone through every single one of them as we've discussed this. The connection between the two holds a very deep mystical significance. It is thought that the Shekhinah, the divine aspect of God, was exiled just as we have been throughout the centuries, time and time again. Kabbalists believe that the mourning that occurs during this time is an opportunity to repair the separation between the upper world of the spiritual and the lower earthly realm. The opportunity is there, but the question, is humanity ready to take it? Opportunities for growth present themselves, but we have to be willing to reach out and grab them for what they are, even when they are cloaked in tragedy or obstacle. The Book of Lamentations is chanted in some synagogues throughout the world on Tisha B'Av. Moses begins with Echa, which can be translated as, "How did this happen?" It is important to know that this very question, "How did this happen?" is at the core of all of it. How did we get to the point that not one, but 2 temples were destroyed? How is it possible for the evil of Haman or Hitler or their future descendants to take hold and proliferate within a humanity enabling mass destruction to threaten all that was good and just in the world, and still can be happening around the world to this day. We don't seem to be making many strides forward. Much like the Israelites wandering for 40 years, seemingly getting nowhere, we seem to still be treading the same path. Not a whole lot feels like it's changed at times. People still use words to create doubt, fuel paranoia, wage war, and destroy much of the beauty and the gift of what we have been given. And yet, the seasons change, years go by, and somehow, we survive in spite of ourselves. Maybe Moses, at his very core, knew this. If we used our words to keep telling the story to the next generation and the next one and those to follow, there would be hope for a future still yet to be. We are a people founded on faith, hope, and resilience. It can be seen in the eyes filled with joy as a new convert emerges from the Mayim Chayim, the waters of life, and in those of the parents of a child being brought into the covenant at a bris or a bar or bat mitzvah, or in the eyes of the bride and the groom under the chuppah. We can choose to dwell on the negativity which surrounds us constantly, or on the joyous moments that can carry us like a string from one to the next. Yes, our world is in a disarray, but there is still so much good to fight for and to pray for and to show up for. We stood by the shores of Babylon and wept for 2 temples that were destroyed, but centuries later, we are still here, remembering. There is a phrase in our parsha, you are as the stars. This can mean many things. One, hearkening back to ancient times when it was foretold that we would one day be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Or likened in science to a star, as stars being able to create their own heat and their light through the process of fusion. Stars smashing tiny little atoms together to make bigger ones, creating huge amounts of energy. Maybe we are both. We haven't been extinguished. We are still here despite the attempts of those who wish to destroy us or even our own self-destructive behaviors. And we are capable of manifesting great energy, both positive and yes, even negative when we want to, but nevertheless manifesting tremendous energy. However, in Kabbalah, there is yet another take. The sun represents daily continuity. The moon represents change. And the stars symbolize the unification of both, allowing the soul to serve the divine with joyful renewal. There is a continuity inherent in the cycle of life, which we are an intrinsic part of, and as Jews we celebrate throughout the year. And yes, change is inevitable whether we like it or not. But being able to serve the divine as a unifying force, to be as the stars, that is a choice that seems to have been set into motion from the very beginning of creation. It is up to us to close the gap between heaven and earth by embracing God with a whole heart, by being co-partners as we were created to be, to embrace that divinity with mind, body, heart, and soul, whether feeling him or her not, to enable and manifest renewal. Even when all around us is despair, and yes, there is much to mourn, that is when it matters the most. I was speaking to my primary doctor the other day, And she said to me, you know, we are all victims of stress. Stress is going to take us all down. Stress is our undoing. And she said, what am I supposed to do? I have family in the Ukraine. I have family in Russia. Am I not supposed to be worried about them? But I can't help but be worried about them. And that creates stress, which creates dis-ease and eventually disease. So we are just coming off the most negative 3 weeks that usually, and I know some of you don't want to hear about it, actually every year at this time coincides with Mercury retrograde. How many have experienced the breaking down of communication, electronics, and things? How many have talked to somebody or felt like calling somebody you haven't talked to in a long time? Has somebody reached out to you? These things happen. But once we get past Tisha B'Av next week, things should start to improve. A lot depends on how we choose to use our words, not only the ones we speak, but the ones that we think. And sometimes those are much louder than the ones coming out of our mouth. And even though I say that things should start to improve, we start to march into the month of Elul. We go through Av and we go through Elul, and we have to prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah. So the process of that renewal and that recreation and that infusion of spirituality, this is all something that is being set into motion right now. Are we going to be victims of the negativity, or are we going to be proactive that is built into our DNA and be like the stars and bump the atoms together within our own being to manifest change and energy to take us forward into the next year? There are many, many players on the stage of life. There is so much that we cannot control. The best that we can do is be mindful and control ourselves as best we can. Sometimes we can't even do that. But we can try to be mindful of our words and how we use them. When negativity comes our way, do our best to dispel it, put an X mark in it, send it away, and try to then cloak it in positivity. Feel it, hear its message, and then wrap it in divine light and embrace the positive. When we weep and we mourn, let us be mindful that all is not lost, because God is always with us, and that as long as we live, there is hope for yet another day and a better tomorrow and another generation to carry the message forward. Moses knew this. With our Parsha and the entire book of Devarim, he is using his words, a man who is thought to have stuttered, to get out the most essential truths of our beginning so that a new one could be forged. Almost 6,000 years later, we are still here to read them, to study them, to speak of them, and to hear them. May we only be worthy and merit the future for those that we love and their journey still yet to unfold, so that one day the cycle can stop and the real promise, the true promise, the divine promise be fulfilled. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Shabbat Shalom.